Oh boy, this one is a slaughter. If you hate the new $500 US RTX 4060 Ti 16GB and want to see it brutally destroyed, then this will be the video for you. Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Now, recently I purchased the 16GB version of the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti for a little over $900. And that's of course 900 Australian dollars, as this is a $500 US product, and while a direct currency conversion is more like 760 Australian dollars, we do have some fun stuff like shipping and sales tax that gets tacked on. Anyway, the point is the 16GB RTX 4060 Ti is an expensive product, and although it very much sucks at $500 US, it's also the cheapest current generation GPU to offer more than 8GB of VRAM. And this is becoming increasingly important as 8GB is quickly becoming unusable for high-end gaming. It's certainly fine for a $200-ish GPU, but it's woefully inadequate at $400 US. And yes, I am looking at you, 80GB RTX 4060 Ti. But what makes the $500 16GB version of the RTX 4060 Ti even worse is the previous generation Radeon RX 6800 XT. Another 16GB GPU, but this one was released back in November of 2020 for $650 US and can be purchased today for as little as $520, though most models are priced at $540 US. But even so, $40 over the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB is a mere 8% premium, and the 6800 XT should be a much more capable product. But before we get to that, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their new 12th gen CPU contact frame by deBauer. It's well known that the integrated loading mechanism, or ILM, of the LGA1700 sockets bends 12th gen CPUs, leading to an uneven contact surface that reduces cooling performance. Solving this issue, the contact frame replaces the ILM, allowing for a much more even contact with the CPU's IHS and the base of your cooler, which in turn reduces operating temperatures. Installation's quick and easy, and thanks to the use of anodized aluminium, the contact frame is non-conductive. And then, for those of you who wish to further maximize contact, Thermal Grizzly now offers an optional lapping tool, so for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so for testing, the CPU used is the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, which has been paired with the Gigabyte X670E Aorus Master, using 32GB of DDR5 6000 CL30 memory. As usual, we'll go over the data for around a dozen titles before jumping into the big breakdown graphs, and the resolutions of interest this time are 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. In total, I've tested 43 games, and as usual, all of the data has been updated for this video, so this is never seen before data on the channel, and we also have 13 ray tracing configurations to look at, so let's get into it. First up, we have a title that's new to the PC, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and here the 6800 XT was 22% faster at 1080p, breaking the 100 FPS barrier. And that margin was extended to 26% at 1440p, and I should note that the jump up here from 66 FPS to 83 FPS on average was very noticeable. And then finally, at 4K, we're again seeing a 26% performance advantage favouring the Radeon GPU. And although 49 FPS is not particularly impressive, it is worlds better than 39 FPS. And with some upscaling help, it should be easy to achieve 60 FPS with the Radeon GPU at 4K using the very high quality preset. Next up, we have Cyberpunk 2077, which is always a very strong title for Nvidia, but even so, here the 6800 XT was 24% faster at 1080p using the high quality preset. And that margin blew out to 36% at 1440p, which is obviously a massive difference, and yet it still managed to get even worse for the RTX 4060 Ti at 4K, where the Radeon GPU was 41% faster on average, and even managed to deliver playable performance, though again upscaling will be required here. Now, a problem for the 6800 XT, at least in Cyberpunk 2077, is ray tracing, as here the RTX 4060 Ti does have an advantage. The GeForce GPU is 27% faster at 1080p, which is a very big margin, 21% faster at 1440p, and 18% faster at 4K, so three pretty significant margins there. The 1080p data, though, is really the only relevant result, given how low the frame rates are, but still, it's a big win for Nvidia. Moving on to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, we're back to devastating losses for the GeForce GPU, as here the Radeon RX 6800 XT was 34% faster at 1080p, 38% faster at 1440p, and 45% faster at 4K. And I think it's fair to say the 4K margin's quite incredible given that the 6800 XT cost just 8% more at most, yet produced 45% more frames. And A Plague Tale Requiem provides no relief for the RTX 4060 Ti, as here the 6800 XT is seen delivering 30% more frames at 1080p, 34% more at 1440p, and a massive 41% more at 4K. And again, the 6800 XT is able to deliver playable performance at 4K, whereas the $500 US RTX 4060 Ti provides a console-like 30 FPS, so pretty embarrassing stuff here for Nvidia. Next up, we have the Callisto Protocol, and here the 6800 XT was 24% faster at 1080p, and then 29% faster at 1440p and 4K. The RTX 4060 Ti was able to deliver playable performance at all three tested resolutions, but without question, you'll receive a much better experience with the Radeon GPU. And even if you enable ray tracing with the ultra quality preset, the 6800 XT is still faster than the RTX 4060 Ti, which is quite incredible. We're still looking at an 11% performance advantage at 1080p, 26% at 1440p, and then 20% at 4K. Those are still some big margins, and the 1440p results are particularly impressive for the 6800 XT, given that it was still able to deliver perfectly playable performance. Moving on to Fortnite, which is a title Nvidia normally does very well in, we find that the 6800 XT was still able to outpace the RTX 4060 Ti, even at 1080p, where it was 16% faster. And then at 1440p, the margin extended to 27% before blowing out completely at 4K to 43%. Now, enabling ray tracing does help the RTX 4060 Ti to catch up and even overtake the 6800 XT, but the advantage certainly isn't huge, winning by an 11% margin at 1080p, which is reasonable, but then just 6% at 1440p, and then we saw a tie at 4K, though that data doesn't really matter given that we're only talking about 17 FPS. Resident Evil 4 is certainly a much more AMD-friendly title, and it shows in this matchup, handing the 6800 XT a massive 30% performance advantage at 1080p, 37% at 1440p, and 52% at 4K. And it's also worth noting that we're looking at another example where the 6800 XT is perfectly usable for 4K gaming without the need for upscaling, whereas it's really a struggle on the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB. And even with ray tracing enabled using the maximum quality preset, the 6800 XT was still 11% faster at 1080p, 18% faster at 1440p, and 34% faster at 4K. So again, it's the 4K data that is particularly brutal for Nvidia. Moving on to Spider-Man Remastered, we see that both GPUs deliver impressive performance in this title using the very high quality preset, but the 6800 XT was still faster, though the margin at 1080p was just 8%, though as we've come to expect, it was extended at 1440p, in this example out to 18% and then 24% at 4K, so still some pretty big wins here for AMD. Now with ray tracing enabled, performance is very similar at 1080p. Here the Radeon GPU was just 2% faster, so basically a tie. Still, the 6800 XT did creep out to a 15% margin at 1440p and then 20% at 4K, and this is with ray tracing enabled. Next up we have Doom Eternal, and this is a comfortable victory for the 6800 XT, hitting 462 FPS at 1080p, making it 25% faster. It was also 29% faster at 1440p and then a massive 39% faster at 4K, though both GPUs did deliver impressive performance at this extreme resolution. Now, the Hogwarts Legacy results are pretty horrific for the 4060 Ti. At 1080p, the 6800 XT is 44% faster, and that is a massive margin. Pretty insane margin, really, but not quite as insane as the 50% margin seen at 1440p and 4K. Yikes. Though helping out the 4060 Ti in a big way is the ultra ray tracing quality settings, as this halves the performance of the 6800 XT, reducing it to the same level of performance as the GeForce GPU. I'm not sure RTFX are worth the performance hit for either GPU in this game, and with just 50 FPS at 1080p, both will require upscaling. The last game that we're going to look at the individual results for is Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and here we see when using the epic quality preset but with ray tracing disabled, that the 6800 XT was 28% faster at 1080p, 33% faster at 1440p, and 21% faster at 4K. Then with ray tracing enabled, the RTX 4060 Ti is able to claw back quite a lot of margin, reducing the 6800 XT's advantage at 1080p to just 5%, though at 1440p we see that the Radeon GPU was still 18% faster and then 17% faster at 4K. Now, the one potential downside to the 6800 XT is power draw, especially when compared to the hyper-efficient RTX 4060 Ti. Here we're seeing that total system usage increased between 50 to 60% with the Radeon GPU, resulting in a massive 150 watt increase, which I probably don't have to tell you is very significant. That said though, the 6800 XT was 50% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti in Hogwarts Legacy, so the fact that system usage increased by 56%, it's not a particularly big deal in this example, resulting in pretty similar levels of efficiency. However, when testing with Spider-Man Remastered, the 6800 XT was 18% faster, and that doesn't quite justify the 56% increase in total system usage. Also, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, while that did see a 33% performance increase, that doesn't quite justify the 58% increase in power usage. The power efficiency figures also get much worse for the 6800 XT with ray tracing enabled. For example, under these conditions, both GPUs delivered the same level of performance, but the Radeon configuration gulped down 57% more power. So if power efficiency is a major concern for you, buying a previous generation GPU probably won't make sense. Okay, so we've just had a look at almost a dozen of the 43 games tested, some with and without ray tracing enabled, and now it is time to see how these two GPUs compare across all of the games tested. So let's go do that, and we'll start with the 1080p data. So when mixing all the data that we've gathered, we see that on average, the 6800 XT is 19% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB, which is impressive given that right now it costs just 8% more. There's also just two examples where the Radeon GPU was slower by a 10% margin or greater at 1080p, and both examples did have ray tracing enabled. Therefore, if we remove the ray tracing configurations, we see that on average, the 6800 XT was 23% faster. So not a massive difference there, but it's clear that the Radeon GPU is faster overall. In fact, even with just the ray tracing data, we see that the 6800 XT was 5% faster on average, so similar performance overall, but it means even when focusing just on ray tracing performance, the Radeon GPU is still faster, which is quite amazing. Now, increasing the resolution to 1440p extends the 6800 XT's advantage out to 26% for the mixed data, and again, there are just a few examples here where it was slower by a double-digit margin. Meanwhile, of the 56 configurations tested, the 6800 XT was faster by a 30% margin or more for 38% of them. But if we remove the ray tracing results, we find the 6800 XT is 30% faster on average, with no real losses. That is a significant performance increase, and typically you'd expect to pay a pretty big premium for that kind of uplift. For example, at MSRP, the RTX 3080 was 40% more expensive than the RTX 3070, yet based on our day one review data, it was just 22% faster. Even if we're to focus just on the ray tracing results, the 6800 XT was still on average 12% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti at 1440p, which is a convincing win and really eliminates one of the key advantages GeForce GPUs currently have, that of course being better ray tracing performance. And finally, we have the 4K data, and here's a look at all the configurations tested in a single graph. If you want to game at 4K, the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB just doesn't have the required power. I mean, sure, it could be possible with some tweaking to the quality settings, but for the most part, it's just not very good. I wouldn't even say the 6800 XT is an optimal 4K gamer, but compared to the 4060 Ti, it sure is, delivering 32% more performance on average. Then with the ray tracing results removed, we're looking at 37% greater performance on average, which is insane. This is just complete and utter destruction of the RTX 4060 Ti. Clearly, if you want to game at 4K, you would ignore the GeForce GPU and instead get yourself a 6800 XT. Finally, I'm not sure ray tracing at 4K is an option with either one of these GPUs, but in any case, the 6800 XT does do a better job, delivering 15% more performance on average. Well, there you have it. Yet more evidence of just how bad the RTX 4060 Ti is, and in particular that $500 asking price for the new 16GB version. And as I've said in previous content, this 16GB model, it really should cost no more than $400 US, and really, ideally, I think $350 US should be the asking price. But regardless of what I think about what this thing should have cost or what should have been, it's quite clear that the Radeon RX 6800 XT is a significantly better buy right now. You've just seen the performance, but it is also worth noting that this graphics card you can see on screen here is typically what you get for $500 US when buying an RTX 4060 Ti 16GB. It's a cheap little dual fan card, pretty embarrassing really. Though I should note that I have seen some triple fan models selling at the MSRP which don't look too bad, such as the Gigabyte WindForce Gaming OC version, but most of them do cost upwards of $530 US. Meanwhile, at the time of making this video, numerous high-quality 6800 XTs can be purchased for $540 US, including this XFX Speedster Merc 319 model, a very impressive high-quality graphics card that does justify the asking price. The only drawback here being the excessive power consumption of the older RDNA2 architecture, but for me personally, I'll be happy to sacrifice some power usage for such a massive performance uplift. But power is also relatively cheap here, and the extra 150 watts doesn't hurt the operating volume as these higher end 6800 XTs like the Speedster Merc are designed to run cool and quiet, and they do. But this is certainly something well worth considering as the 6800 XT does use significantly more power, and I'm sure you could undervolt it to reduce consumption, but you could also do the same thing to the 4060 Ti, so it's a bit of a moot point. I think it's quite surprising that ray tracing is not a lever that the RTX 4060 Ti can pull to justify its existence. And that's because if you care about ray tracing, you're just as well looked after here by the 6800 XT. In most examples, the Radeon GPU is actually better. So if anything, ray tracing is a pro for AMD in this matchup, which is just amazingly ironic. So other than power efficiency, the only other key advantage of the RTX 4060 Ti is DLSS. And typically speaking, the upscaling component of DLSS does yield higher quality results than FSR, but it's not worlds better. So while certainly an advantage, it's not a big win for Nvidia. Our preference would be for DLSS, but for those of you gaming at 4K for example, it's not always noticeably better than FSR, and FSR support has grown quite rapidly. This is really only a feature that can tip things in Nvidia's favour if all else is very close. And of course, there's also DLSS frame generation, and depending on your use case, this can be a key feature, though it's not going to make up for the kind of performance deficit we see between the 4060 Ti 16GB and 6800 XT. Also, how useful frame generation is for single-player gamers will depend on the gamer. A lot of you have told us that you don't like it, while many of you have said you love it. And Tim's feedback is that it's only useful under specific conditions in certain single-player games. So opinions are going to vary on that one, but for those of you playing multiplayer games, it really is worse than useless, so keep that in mind if you mostly play multiplayer titles. So really, when all is said and done, the best GPU currently available at the $500 US price point is without question the Radeon RX 6800 XT. It makes an absolute mockery of Nvidia's new 16GB RTX 4060 Ti. It's also amusing to note that if the 6800 XT was still selling for the $650 US MSRP today, it would offer the same cost per frame as the 4060 Ti 16GB. So that's not exactly moving the needle forward after 2.5 years, is it? If anything, we seem to have gone a bit backwards. And on that terrible note, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to get more cool Hardware Unboxed goodness, don't know if I'm selling it with that line, but anyway, we do have Floatplane and Patreon, so check those out if you're interested because it will get you access to our exclusive Discord server. Very cool place to hang out and talk about tech-related stuff, or, well, actually really anything it seems. We also do our monthly live stream, so Tim and I get together, we answer your questions live, so that's a fun thing for Patreon and Floatplane members, behind-the-scenes content and Q&As. So some cool stuff there. If you're interested, check it out, but if not, perfectly fine, and I would like to thank you for watching this video, especially if you watched it all the way to the end. Good job. But yeah, that's going to do it. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.